If you saw my last video, you know that one of the strategies I use for increasing my profit margin within my Etsy print-on-demand business was to, unlike a lot of sellers, start by selling sweatshirts instead of t-shirts. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mandy, and as the owner of multiple six-figure businesses, including several Etsy print-on-demand shops, my goal is to use this channel to provide you with strategies that simplify the Etsy print-on-demand journey so that you can achieve success in this business as well and crush your goals. If you haven't seen my other video on the 7 very specific tactics that you can use in your print-on-demand shop to get on the right path and become more profitable, definitely go check that out. It's worth a watch for sure. But for today's video, I want to dive into 3 specific options that you can consider for sweatshirts within print-on-demand. I'm going to take a look at 3 of the most popular brands, including the brand new Comfort Colors sweatshirt that is now available with Printify. We'll take a look at which printer and brands that I used, the print quality of each of them, the material quality of each of them, the cost differences with each of the brands. We'll run some estimated profit calculations, and then I'll tell you which ones I actually use in my shops. We've got a lot to cover. I've got a stack of sweatshirts ready to go, so let's dive in. The 3 brands that I'm using for the sweatshirts today are the Gildan 18,000, which is considered a bestseller on Printify, the Jersey's New Blend sweatshirt, and then the Comfort Colors sweatshirt, which is brand new to Printify. Starting with the Gildan 18,000, I used the same design for all 3 shirts. If we look up closely, we can see the standard direct-to-garment printing style where the ink absorbs into the fabric versus sitting on top of the fabric, which would be more like a vinyl or screen printing. It is normal to see little bits of fiber coming through. Generally, this is pretty standard print for direct-to-garment style. The sweatshirt itself is considered more of a heavyweight, and this particular sample of Gildan is sport gray. Next up is Jersey's. This is in a medium khaki color. And again, up close, we can see the standard direct-to-garment printing. Both Gildan and Jersey's are a 50-50 cotton and polyester blend. And so again, these are going to be a fluffier, softer, by having that blend in there. It's got a very similar weight and feel to the Gildan, so I would say this is very, very comparable to its Gildan 18,000 cousin. And finally, we've got the Comfort Colors. So these are garment dyed sweatshirts, and they are an 80-20 blend. So they are 80% cotton, 20% polyester, which means, as you can tell, the ink is going to absorb slightly differently and generally is known for taking better to garments that have a higher cotton percentage like this. So that results in the print being slightly more vibrant. However, it is still direct-to-garment, and you're generally still going to see a little bit of the fibering coming through. That being said, the 80-20 blend of these Comfort Colors sweatshirts also means that it's got a very different feel to it. This is the pepper color, so it's got very much that kind of vintage feel to it. The fabric itself feels a little bit stiffer. The coloring looks like it's been well worn. I would say if a customer is expecting more of a standard sweatshirt, they could be a little disappointed if they get a Comfort Colors, just because it does feel and look so much more different. So if I were to sell a Comfort Colors sweatshirt, this is one of those where I would definitely get a sample of it so that you could see exactly what it feels like for yourself, because it is noticeably different from your standard Gildan or Jersey's sweatshirt that most people are used to buying. I also did some quick comparisons in the shoulder length, which was nearly identical across all 3. Sleeve length, the Jersey's was ever so slightly longer for sleeves, and then overall size and width, Comfort Colors ended up being a little bit longer, and the Jersey's brand ended up being a little bit wider. So the Jersey's do seem to run just a tiny bit bigger, but not super significant. To get the cost information, let's head out to Printify. The first one we'll take a look at is Gildan. So we've got that here under the sweatshirt options. As I said, I like to use SwiftPod. There are definitely lots of other options. Demona T does a nice job. Monster is really good. Awkward Styles is really good. I always look at the rating that they've got as a provider, as well as their pricing and shipping information too, because that's going to make a big difference for your profit. So if we look at SwiftPod and then we go to more details, this is where we'll see the cost breakdown. So for each of the sweatshirts, I'm going to price these out at a typical large size. And just for consistency, we'll use sport gray or whatever gray option is available for each of them. So for SwiftPod, for the Gildan 18,000, if we look at Sport Gray and then we click on the little down arrow, we'll see the breakdown. So for the large size, you can see that the regular cost is $22.67, and if you have Printify Premium, it's $17.46. And then if we scroll up a little bit and click on the shipping tab, we'll see that for US shipping for that first item, which is for the sake of comparison, what we'll use for this one is $8.49. So I'll make a note of that for Gildan. And we'll come back out, head back to Sweatshirts, and then let's look at jerseys. So the unisex and new blend crew neck is the one that we'll take a peek at. You'll notice for this one, SwiftPod is the only option. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So if we click on more details, again, we can look at a side-by-side comparison. For this one, let's use Athletic Heather. That's going to be the closest for comparison's sake. So if we look at the large, we can see that $21.39 is the standard price and $16.47 is the premium price. Typically, if it's with the same provider, the shipping will be the same, and it is at $8.49 for Sweatshirts. And then for the last one, we'll go back to the Sweatshirts, and the Comfort Colors right now is towards the bottom. So we'll go to Comfort Colors 1566 and take a look at that. Again, SwiftPod is the only option right now. So if we look at more details, they have a lot of colors, and so for this one, let's go with gray. And then if we look at large, you can see that the large price for regular is $36.70 and the premium price is $28.26. We'll confirm that shipping is the same, yep, at $8.49. And so that gives us our cost information. Then we're going to use a profit calculator so that we can plug those costs in and start playing around with numbers to see what will work best for us. There are plenty of free options out there for profit calculators that work really well. Etsy Hunt has a great one under their toolkit, as well as eRank. I have one that I've actually built here. It's built in Google Docs. It is one that I've used and I share it with my Patreon community. I'm very visual, so it's got a dashboard with a roll-up of all of the monthly tracking, and so every single month you can see what your sales and expenses are and then total profit. And then it rolls into a year-to-date summary, and then it tracks for you so that you can see it throughout the year as well. I also have, as part of this spreadsheet, a profit calculator tab where I use it to plug in the information, the costs. I can play around with things like coupons and Etsy ads and see how those different variables will impact my profit margin. And I use it to help me determine the best way to set my profits. And so you can see off to the right, this isn't normally here. I just plugged it in as we were reviewing that on the Printify site so that I would have it all at a glance for us. So if we start plugging in our costs first, material costs, let's start with Gildan. So if we used the regular cost amount, which remember there's a difference between regular and premium, let's plug in that $22.67 and the cost of shipping was $8.49. And so then depending on how we want to structure this, I generally like to build in the ability to have a discount. And so depending on how aggressively you want to be able to discount on Etsy, for example, typically around holidays, they will promote or feature shops that have at least a 20% discount in their shop. So if you want to be able to offer deeper discounts like that, make sure you build it into your cost. You also need to factor in shipping and whether or not you will be including that in your price or passing along part or all of that cost to your customer. So let's use the example of a 20% discount. We'll factor that into our cost. Let's say that we want to split the difference in cost with our customer and say that we want to have them pay $5 for the shipping. And so as you can see, the spreadsheet is starting to calculate all of that in. Right now we haven't built in a cost, so obviously we are looking at a loss here for profit. And so if we wanted to say use $39 as the price of our sweatshirt out on Etsy, and let's say we are a new seller and we have offsite ads turned off, you can add those in here as well. Remember, if you hit more than 10K revenue in a year, they will turn that on automatically for you at 12%. So make sure you've plugged that in if that applies to you. If we set our sale price at $39, that means we would only be making $1.15 in profit. I don't know about you, but that's not a very good profit margin because remember, we're factoring in a 20% discount for that customer. So let's say we raise our price to $49 for a sweatshirt. That gets us to an $8 margin. And so this is where you might say, gosh, I don't know that I could reasonably say that the cost of this sweatshirt for a customer is $49, even though that is not what they are necessarily paying if you have a sale running. So let's say we wanted to then lower this to, let's say, 15% as our max coupon discount. So that again raises our profit margin. We're now kind of above that $10 threshold, which for most print-on-demand sellers is a good margin. Anytime you can land for this margin percentage between 20 to 30% is a good profit margin. I do want to show you a quick comparison in what it means in your profit margin difference to have premium. So we saw that premium has a much lower product cost. And this is true of most products with the Printify premium discount because you're getting up to 20% off of all of the products. And so if we were then to change our material cost difference and change that to $17.46, look at what that does to our profit margin. It went up by $5. So then let's say we did want to have a deeper discount, we could then kick that back up to 20%, potentially compete with other sellers that are having higher sales and potentially get that boost from Etsy whenever it's holiday time. And we can still get a $3 higher profit for each of these units sold. And so let's use this as our bar as we look at the rest of the products. I'm going to, just for comparison's sake, I'm going to leave all these other variables the same, and I'm going to use the premium rate for the rest of these products so that you can see what that would look like as a comparison. So I'm going to plug in this $13.60 as our estimated profit for Gildan. Next, let's take a look at jerseys. And so if we look at the premium rate for jerseys, we saw that it is $16.47. So that is our material cost. As you can see, it's a little bit less, so our profit is slightly more in this case. All of the variables are the same. And so if we plug that into jerseys, we've got $14.59 as our profit margin. And again, 33% for a profit margin. You're looking pretty good on that one. And remember, that's still with offering a 20% discount to customers. You could do that in a couple different ways. You could have 15% be your standard kind of daily 24-hour sale. I tend to be a big supporter of those because you get the countdown on Etsy and it creates that sense of urgency for customers as they're scrolling through listings. And then you can reserve this 20% as those coupon codes that can be generated through those automatic Etsy emails for things like abandoned carts, people who are adding your items as favorites, as well as for returning customers. So there are a couple different strategies that you could use once you've built in a comfortable margin for your products. And finally, let's look at Comfort Colors. Now, we already know that this one is going to have to sell at a much higher premium because the base cost alone, even to use Printify Premium, is still over $10 higher than all of the rest. So if we plug in that number, $28.26, obviously that starts us out at a very low profit. And so as we think about increasing this price, and let's say we want to raise it, let's start with $10. Even that is still really below 20%. You could start with that, but again, you're already looking at a much lower profit margin than either of the other less premium options, which from a strategy standpoint doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so if we needed to push this higher, let's say we went with 62, again, we're building in that coupon amount. And so to be able to offer a 20% discount and get it above that 20% margin threshold is still only bringing in $12.21. And so we can keep pushing this number even higher. Let's say 67. That is kind of what gets us above some of those other profit margins. So that means you'd have to sell this item at a base price of 67 with a 20% discount. So that $67 is not what the customer is paying. They're paying for $67 minus that 20% discount. We're adding in shipping. So again, if you're not factoring in shipping, or if you've got the free shipping guarantee turned on, you have to factor that in as well, because guess what? You're automatically going to be selling these items above that $35 threshold. So if we wipe that out, you're already, again, kind of in the losing ranks here. And so you have to factor in all of those different things. And that's why it is so important to use these profit calculators and understand what your numbers are in terms of your expenses, your cost of the item, your cost of shipping it from Printify versus what the customer is paying for. Because if you are not building in enough profit, you may find yourself losing a whole lot of money, or making so little that it's really not worth the effort that you're probably putting into your shop. But you don't have to run your shop that way. You just need to be able to use a calculator, whether it's this one as part of my Patreon support or whether it's a free one from Etsy Hunt or eRank. They all more or less work the same and are going to have the same fields. Find one that works for you and make sure you are tracking your numbers. So if the $67 feels a little high to even have as a base price, again, remember this is not what your customer is paying. Let's say we want to split the difference, and let's say we want to have it set at $65. And so if we carry this through, we've got all of our numbers essentially static as a comparison from the others. We can plug in this number here. So if we zoom in to all of our numbers that we looked at and we take a look at essentially this bottom line, again, looking at different variables across each of the brands and based on static settings that we had in terms of discount and shipping and things like that, we can see that plus or minus about $1, all three of these brands are going to run roughly the same in terms of profit. You just need to know that your cost of these items is going to be very different between the Gildan and Jerseys versus Comfort Colors, and therefore you need to understand the difference in what you would need to charge for your customer depending on which brand you go with. And one final word on profit margins. Remember, we were specifically looking at a large gray sweatshirt. With SwiftPod in particular, different colors, different sizes can have cost variances. So make sure you're looking at that. Make sure you're running all of the numbers so that you have a complete picture and are making good, solid decisions when it comes to your pricing strategy. If you've heard my other videos before, you know that I quite often like to set my prices based on the profit margin percentage, and will often use anywhere between 65 and 68% as kind of my target profit margin percentage when I'm setting it on Printify. Again, that is not the final price or profit margin that I am getting. That is just kind of a baseline that I like to use so that no matter what size the customer chooses, no matter what color they choose, I always make sure that I still have a healthy profit at the end of it. And again, whether you're factoring in free shipping or not, or splitting that cost of shipping, all of these are things that you need to factor in and will impact what your pricing strategy is. So make sure you're running those calculations. So which brand do I actually use across my various shops? Well, the good old standby Gildan 18,000. And there's a couple of different reasons why I actually chose this as my strategy. Number one, my customers and the target audience love Gildan 18,000. I consistently get tons of compliments in my reviews of how much they love the fact that they are very soft and fleece-like on the inside. There's a reason that these Gildans are considered best sellers. Are they the most premium sweatshirt out there? Absolutely not. But for the price that I'm able to offer them at and the quality that they get from a good old tried and true ends up being worth it. I will say that I do use jerseys as a backup during the holidays, especially if I've had trouble with certain colors running out with Gildan, particularly with forest green and sand. Those tend to be huge sellers during the holidays, and so I have used them in the past as a backup for my standard Gildan, and I typically let my customers know if I'm ever substituting that out. And speaking of holidays, that is one of the other reasons why I tend to use the Gildan 18,000 as my go-to sweatshirt. And that is because holidays can get pretty bananas. The print providers do their best to have a good estimate on the stock that they need and to do restocks as quickly as possible. However, it doesn't always happen depending on a variety of different circumstances. So for that reason, I personally like to have a backup with the Jerseys brand and with Comfort Colors for sweatshirts. there is only one provider for each of those currently with Printify, and that is SwiftPod. So that means if any of those stock go down during the holidays, you don't have a backup, at least with Printify. You might have to source it elsewhere, or you're going to have to be chasing down your customers constantly and asking them to pick a different color, which they may or may not want to do. And often tracking down customers, they don't always respond right away. Whereas with Gildan 18,000, there's tons of providers, many of them who have a variety of different colors. So I intentionally choose colors that I know other providers will have, which means if something happens with SwiftPod or if they run out of stock in a size or a color, I generally have a backup that I can switch easily to within Printify. It's the beauty of having the Printify network is that they have a variety of providers, particularly for apparel, that offer similar things. Again, not every product has a backup on Printify. That's just how it goes. But whenever possible, that's definitely a strategy that I've tried to use, particularly for the holidays, to save myself the stress and anxiety of having to constantly chase down customers to let them know that A, I either can't fulfill it, or B, I need them to pick a different color. Neither of those are conversations that they enjoy getting or that I like having. So I try to keep things super streamlined and efficient wherever I can, especially for items that I know generally sell at high volume during the holidays. So all that to say, the Gildan 18,000, the tried and true, a good old standby, is the one that works best for me. But again, I think it's super important to know who your customers are, what they would ultimately like, and what would work well for your designs. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you want to learn more about my strategies for print-on-demand success, make sure you're subscribed to my channel and have that notification button turned on so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming content. And in the meantime, if you haven't already, make sure you check out my dedicated playlist with my free masterclass course right here on YouTube. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. And if you're looking for more helpful ways to continue the work and stay connected, I invite you to join me over on Patreon, where I provide a membership to get exclusive access to my Google Drive with all sorts of wonderful tools and resources that I've created and continue adding to every month. It's also a place to join conversations as I think about future content and how I can serve you with the most amount of value. I also hope that you'll smash that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on all of the exciting upcoming content that I've got planned for this channel. And finally, I invite you to check out my brand new website where you can subscribe to my own email list, follow along on new blog content that I will be building, and access other freebies that I have available on there to support you on your journey.